during a school drop-off on Monday, and she says her daughter was loving, supportive, and an amazing mother.
She loved her son.
Her baby's father held her in a headlock. His new girlfriend shot her in the face. But the reason police let the killer walk free is the most shocking part of the story. It was a morning filled with promise, the kind that feels like a clean page in a new chapter. 6-year-old Jeremiah, September 8, 2025, was a huge milestone, his first day of first grade. And his mother, Romeca Meeks Blackmom, made sure he started it with a heart full of love. Tucked inside his lunchbox, she placed a handwritten note, a private message of encouragement between a mother and her son. Later, she would post a picture of it, a proud parent sharing a simple, beautiful moment. The note read, "Happy Monday, son. This is a fresh start to this day and you can start off strong. Always remain yourself. You're the coolest, smartest, and funniest kid I know. I love you so much and you make me so proud. Have a great day. Mommy loves you." Every word was a testament to her devotion, a promise of her unwavering support. That note, filled with the ordinary, powerful love of a mother, should have been a cherished memory. Instead, it became her final testament. The ink on that paper was barely dry when the promise of a fresh start was shattered by an act of unimaginable violence. Because just hours after dropping her son off at school, on a public street in the middle of the day, Romeca was ambushed. The attack was as brutal as it was shocking. According to witness and family accounts, her child's father allegedly held her in a headlock, rendering her helpless. And in that moment, his new girlfriend is said to have pulled the trigger, ending Romeca's life with gunshots to her face and thigh. This is the story of Romeca Meeks Blackmom, a 31-year-old Chicago mother whose last loving words to her son would go viral for the most heartbreaking reason imaginable. Her story captured the nation's attention not just because of its brutality, but because of the stark, gut-wrenching contrast between the gentle love in that note and the cold-blooded violence that followed. How does a morning that begins with a mother's pride end with that same mother's murder? On the surface, this was a story about a co-parenting relationship. Two people navigating the shared responsibility of raising a child. But beneath that surface, a darker reality was festering. It was a reality of domestic conflict, of fear, and of a system that was supposed to protect her. Romeca reportedly had a restraining order against her son's father, a legal document that served as a silent scream, a warning that the peace was fragile and the potential for violence was real. It was a warning that, on that tragic Monday, was allegedly ignored. The events of that day raised terrifying questions about the effectiveness of our justice system and the hidden dangers that can lurk behind seemingly normal family dynamics. If you believe that stories like Romeca's deserve to be told, and that the fight for justice for victims of domestic violence is more important than ever, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Now, let's dive into the life Romeca was building, the people involved in her final moments, and the justice her family is still desperately fighting for. To understand how a day could begin with such love and end in such tragedy, we first need to understand the people at the heart of this story. And we begin with the woman who wrote that note, Romeca Meeks Blackmom. To her friends and family, she was affectionately known as Big Meeks, a nickname that spoke to her large presence and even bigger heart. At 31 years old, Romeca was a woman on a mission. She wasn't just surviving, she was actively building a foundation for a better life for herself and her young son. She was enrolled in school, studying to become a nurse, a profession that perfectly matched the kind, supportive, and caring nature her family said defined her. Becoming a nurse is a demanding journey. It requires immense dedication, late nights of studying, and a deep, intrinsic desire to care for others. This was the future Romeca was carving out. A future of stability, of service, and of setting an example for her son that hard work and compassion are the cornerstones of a meaningful life. Everything she did, every ambition she chased, was intertwined with her role as a mother. Her world revolved around her 6-year-old boy, Jeremiah. That lunchbox note wasn't a one-off gesture. It was a window into their daily reality. It showed a mother who was present, who was affirming, and who made sure her son knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was loved and that he made her proud. She was his biggest cheerleader, the center of his universe. And in just a few years, she would have been the woman in scrubs he could proudly call a nurse. That was the future she was working toward, a future that was stolen from them both. Now, we must turn to the other individuals in this triangle of conflict. First, there is Carlos Way, known as Los. Carlos was Jeremiah's father and Romeca's ex-partner. The specific timeline and the intimate details of their relationship's breakdown remain largely private, as is often the case. We don't have access to their text messages or the history of their arguments. But we do have one critical official document that speaks volumes about the state of their connection: a restraining order. Let's be clear about what a restraining order represents. It is not a casual document. It is a legal measure of last resort, sought by a person who feels threatened, harassed, or endangered. It is a formal plea to the justice system saying, "I need protection. I cannot create safety on my own." For Romeca to have gone through the legal process to obtain an order of protection against the father of her child, it indicates a history of conflict so severe that she feared for her well-being. It paints a picture of a co-parenting dynamic that had fractured under the weight of fear and intimidation, long before that final, fatal confrontation. The order was meant to be her shield, a legally mandated boundary. But as we will see, that shield would prove to be tragically penetrable. And that brings us to the third person present on that day, Holly Johnson. At 30 years old, Holly was Carlos Way's new girlfriend. She was the new factor in an already volatile equation. In stories of domestic conflict, the introduction of a new partner can often act as an accelerant, intensifying jealousy, territorial disputes, and long-simmering resentment. Holly Johnson was not a passive bystander in the events of September 8th. According to police reports and witnesses, she was the one who held the weapon. She was the one who fired the shots that killed Romeca Meeks' Blackmom. While she would later claim self-defense, and it was confirmed she had a valid concealed carry license, her active participation turned a domestic dispute into a homicide. So here we have the three key figures: a devoted mother building a future, an ex-partner with a restraining order against him, and his new girlfriend, armed and present. From the outside, anyone watching that morning might have just seen two parents and another adult near a school. But with the knowledge of the restraining order, the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a random argument. It was the culmination of a known conflict, a convergence of past pain and present tension on a public street. The foundation of their relationship was not just cracked. It was broken, and it was about to shatter in the most violent way imaginable. As we continue to unfold this story, we want to acknowledge the community that forms around these cases. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's powerful to see how far these stories can reach and how many people demand justice alongside the families. The story of Romeca Meeks Blackmom's final day doesn't truly begin with the gunshot. It begins with the failure of a system designed to prevent it. It begins with the piece of paper that was supposed to be her shield, the restraining order. This legal document was the official recognition of a threat. It was Romeca's voice, amplified by the courts, declaring that a line had to be drawn, that a physical and emotional boundary was necessary for her safety. For victims of domestic conflict, a restraining order is often the only tangible defense they have. It represents hope that the law will stand as a guardian when personal appeals for peace have failed. But those who have lived in the shadow of domestic turmoil know a terrifying truth. A piece of paper cannot physically stop a person intent on causing harm. According to Romeca's family, the order was effectively ignored, treated as a mere suggestion rather than a legal mandate. This is the nightmare scenario for anyone who puts their faith in the justice system. The very document meant to empower and protect you is rendered powerless by the sheer audacity of the person it's meant to restrain. This systemic breakdown created the conditions for tragedy. The conflict wasn't just escalating behind closed doors anymore. It was about to spill onto a public street, because the one tool designed to contain it had failed. The escalation that mattered wasn't over weeks or months. It would happen in a matter of minutes. To fully grasp the horror of those minutes, we must first return to the piece of Romeca's morning. Before the confrontation, before the violence, her day was defined by love. Imagine her at the kitchen table, pen in hand, carefully writing out her message to Jeremiah. The world outside, with all its complications and fears, faded away. In that moment, there was only her love for her son. Let's read her words again and truly consider them. Happy Monday, son. She began, infusing the start of his week with positivity. This is a fresh start to this day, and you can start off strong. The irony of those words is shattering. She was speaking of a fresh start for him, completely unaware that she would be denied her own forever. She continued, building him up with the affirmations only a mother can give. Always remain yourself. You're the coolest, smartest, and funniest kid I know. This is the foundation of a child's confidence, being built, letter by letter. And finally, the purest expression of her heart. I love you so much, and you make me so proud. Have a great day. Mommy loves you. This note is the most crucial piece of evidence in understanding Romeca's state of mind. She was not preparing for a fight. She was not looking for a confrontation. Her entire emotional and mental energy was focused on one thing: being a good mother. She sealed that note in his lunchbox, a pocket full of love to help him through his day, and then proudly shared a photo of her handiwork online. It was a simple, universal act of parenthood. This was the gentle, loving space she occupied just hours, perhaps even minutes, before everything was ripped away. Then came the confrontation. The transition from peace to violence was brutally swift. After dropping Jeremiah off, Romeca was confronted by Carlos Way and Holly Johnson. Police would later classify the incident as a physical altercation, stemming from a domestic-related dispute. These are clinical, detached terms. They suggest a fight between two or more people, a situation where fault might be shared. But Romeca's family describes it with a much more sinister word: an ambush. An ambush implies a plan and intent to trap. It suggests that Romeca was not an equal participant in a fight, but the target of a coordinated attack. The sequence of events is chilling. It begins with a verbal argument on the street, drawing the attention of witnesses. But words quickly escalate to actions. In what can only be described as a profound betrayal, Carlos Way, the father of her child, allegedly grabbed Romeca and placed her in a headlock. In that single action, she was overpowered, restrained, and made completely vulnerable. She was held in place by the very man she had a restraining order against. And it was in this moment of helplessness that Holly Johnson allegedly made her move. She didn't de-escalate. She didn't call for help. She escalated the situation to its most violent and final conclusion. She pulled out a handgun. The sound of gunshots tore through the morning air, and a mother's life, filled with so much promise, was extinguished on the pavement. In the hours and days that followed, the story exploded online. Fueled by the heartbreaking image of the lunchbox note, Romeca's murder became a viral flashpoint for a national conversation. On platforms like X, formerly Twitter, thousands of posts questioned how this could happen. How could a woman with a restraining order be killed in broad daylight by the man she was protected from and his partner? The discussion quickly spiraled into larger, more painful topics. Her story became a case study in the devastating reality of femicide, particularly within Black communities, where such tragedies are tragically frequent yet often underreported. People began to dissect the toxic dynamics of what is often dismissively called baby daddy drama. Romeca's story was a horrifying example that these are not petty squabbles. They are life and death struggles where threats can become actions at any moment. Viral videos from the scene, capturing the raw reactions of witnesses, amplified the calls for accountability. This was no longer just a local crime story. It had become a symbol of a broken system, a testament to the fact that for many women the law is not a shield, but a piece of paper that burns up in the face of violence. So we are left with a critical question, one that extends far beyond this single case. If you were a bystander and saw a confrontation like this escalating, what would you do? What would you advise a friend or loved one who is in a situation where a restraining order isn't being respected? Share your thoughts below. Because these conversations are the first step in finding solutions and preventing the next tragedy. The morning of Monday, September 8, 2025, was unfolding like any other in the bustling South Loop neighborhood of Chicago. Near the intersection of Cermak Road and State Street, the city was alive with the rhythms of a new work week. Traffic flowed, pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, and the air was filled with the ambient sounds of urban life. It was into this scene of absolute normalcy that an explosion of brutal, intimate violence was about to erupt. Romeca Meeks Blackmom had just completed the most important task of her morning. She had dropped her son, Jeremiah, off for his first day of first grade, leaving him with a kiss goodbye and a lunchbox filled with love. Her maternal duties for the morning were done. But as she stepped back out onto the street, her path was deliberately blocked. Carlos Way and Holly Johnson were there waiting. What began next, under the indifferent gaze of the city, was the final act of a long and troubled history. Witnesses would later describe a heated, public argument. Voices were raised, escalating in anger and intensity. For anyone passing by, it might have looked like another domestic dispute, an uncomfortable but all too common sight. But this was different. This was the flashpoint, the moment where years of simmering conflict, fear, and resentment would finally boil over with deadly consequences. The argument quickly spiraled out of the realm of words. It became physical. This is where the accounts paint a truly horrifying picture of betrayal and domination. Carlos Way, the man with whom Romeca shared a child, the man she once trusted enough to build a life with, allegedly made a move to physically overpower her. He reportedly grabbed her and forced her into a headlock. Let us pause and consider the absolute terror of that moment. A headlock is an act of total control. It is immobilizing, suffocating. It restricts movement, sight, and breath. In that instant, Romeca was no longer a free person arguing on a street corner. She was a captive, her body held hostage by her ex-partner. Any chance she had to de-escalate, to retreat, to escape, was physically taken from her. She was rendered completely defenseless, held in place as the target. This single act of physical aggression by Carlos created the opening for the final, irreversible act of violence by Holly Johnson. With Romeca restrained and vulnerable, Holly allegedly revealed that she was armed. She produced a handgun. The dynamic of the confrontation shifted seismically. This was no longer a fist fight or a shouting match. The introduction of a firearm transformed it into a life-or-death situation, a grotesque imbalance of power. Holly Johnson, who held a valid concealed carry license, now held Romeca's life in her hands. She had the choice to de-escalate, to brandish the weapon as a warning, to create distance. Instead, she chose to fire. 2 shots rang out, a percussive, violent sound that cut through the noise of the city. The attack was targeted and brutal. 1 bullet struck Romeca in the thigh, a disabling wound designed to ensure she couldn't flee. The other shot was aimed higher, striking her in the face, in the area of her chin, an act of intimate, devastating violence. Romeca collapsed. The immediate aftermath was a scene of chaos and horror. Witnesses scattered, sirens wailed in the distance, and a mother lay bleeding on the sidewalk. Police arrived to a grim tableau. They secured the scene, where the evidence of the violent encounter was stark. Shell casings were found on the ground and on the windshield of a nearby vehicle. The handgun was recovered. Holly Johnson was detained right there, at the scene of the crime she is alleged to have committed. Paramedics worked frantically to save Romeca's life. She was rushed to Stroger Hospital, one of Chicago's top trauma centers, but the damage was too severe. The gunshot wounds, particularly the one to her head, were catastrophic. Despite the efforts of medical professionals, Romeca Meeks Blackmon was pronounced dead. The loving mother who had started her day with a note of encouragement for her son's future had been robbed of her own, executed in broad daylight on a city street. After the chaos of the crime scene and the sterile finality of the hospital, the story of Romeca Meeks Blackmon moved into the halls of justice. And it is here that the tragedy deepened, sparking a wave of outrage that rippled through her community and across the country. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Holly Johnson, the woman who allegedly fired the fatal shots, was taken into custody. With a deceased victim, a recovered weapon, and a public crime scene with witnesses, the expectation for her family and for the public was clear. Charges would be filed. An arrest would be made. The wheels of justice would begin to turn. But they didn't. In a move that stunned and horrified Romeca's loved ones, Holly Johnson was released from custody shortly after her arrest. No formal charges were filed against her by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Her claim was one of self-defense. A claim that a woman holding a valid concealed carry license was defending herself in a volatile situation. Yet this claim stands in stark, confounding contrast to the reported facts of the incident. How does one claim self-defense when the victim was unarmed and allegedly being held in a headlock by your partner? Who or what was she defending herself from? Was a restrained, overpowered woman a lethal threat? These are the questions that hang heavy in the air, unanswered. The official status of the case became a familiar, frustrating refrain. The investigation is ongoing. It was handed over to the Chicago Police Department's Area 3 detectives, disappearing behind a wall of procedural silence. For Romeca's family, this wasn't justice delayed. It felt like a profound and immediate injustice. A denial of the truth that played out for all to see. While the legal system moved with agonizing slowness, Romeca's family was plunged into the depths of unimaginable grief. Their pain was not private, it was a raw public wound. On September 12, 2025, just 4 days after her murder, family and friends gathered in the West Englewood neighborhood for a vigil. They released pink, white, and silver balloons into the sky, a beautiful, heartbreaking tribute to a life taken far too soon. It was here that Romeca's mother, Tina McMiller, stood before the crowd and gave voice to her agony. With tears streaming down her face, she said, "Romeca was my baby. I am broken, I am so broken." Her words captured the shattering reality of every parent who has had to bury a child. Her daughter was not just a headline or a case file, she was her baby. And now she was gone. That grief was compounded by the looming milestone of what should have been a joyous occasion, her grandson Jeremiah's 7th birthday. The family was left to navigate how to celebrate the life of a little boy while simultaneously mourning the violent death of his mother, the very center of his world. This is the devastating human cost of this tragedy. A child who will blow out his birthday candles every year with the knowledge that his mother is not there to see it. This case is about more than one life lost. It is a story about the perceived failure of every system that was meant to keep Romeca safe. The restraining order that failed to deter her aggressors. The public setting that failed to provide safety in numbers. And now, in the eyes of her family, a justice system that is failing to hold anyone accountable for her death. Romeca's story has become a painful symbol of a larger pattern, a testament to the dangers faced by countless women in volatile domestic situations, and a stark reminder that the fight for accountability is often as grueling and painful as the initial loss itself. The case remains open, an unresolved wound for a family and a community that are still crying out for answers and for justice. The investigation into the death of Romeca Meeks Blackmom remains open. As of today, no charges have been filed, and a family waits in agonizing limbo for a justice that feels increasingly distant. The case file may be sitting on a detective's desk, but the story is alive in the hearts of those who loved her and in the minds of a public that refuses to forget. So, we are left to ask the question that sits at the center of this tragedy. On one hand, the alleged shooter claims self-defense. On the other, the evidence paints a picture of an unarmed mother, physically restrained by her ex-partner and shot at close range. What do you think? Based on the details of this case, was this a tragic instance of self-defense in a chaotic and terrifying moment? Or was this a cold-blooded murder, an ambush on a city street where the system is now failing a devoted mother and her grieving family? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We read every one, and this conversation is a vital part of keeping Romeca's story alive. If you have a painful, personal story that has been overlooked or ignored, and you feel it needs to be told, we invite you to reach out to us. This is Whispers of the Criminal Mind. Subscribe and join us in listening to more stories that demand to be heard.